You are listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I am your host, Celine Yeager. Each week, I bring you advice from athletes, scientists, researchers, and other experts to help you feel and perform your best, no matter what your hormones are doing. This show is a production of Live Feisty Media. Hello, strong, feisty women. So I have a fun one for you this week. I sat down with Amanda Thebe, author of Menopocalypse, How I Learned to Thrive During Menopause, and You Can Too. This is not my first conversation with Amanda, of course. I sat down with her in the fall of 2020, shortly after I started this show and she published that book. I don't think either of us knew at the time how much the menopause space was going to explode in a very short period of time, but it really has. So I wanted to have her back, post-menopocalypse, if you will, and catch up, see how she's doing, and chat about what we've both learned and where we think all this is going. And a little peek behind the curtain here, I had my usual list of orderly questions in front of me when I pushed record on this conversation. But Amanda and I have become friends here over the years, and we sort of rush out of the gate at 90 miles per hour, as friends often do when they start talking about stuff they're passionate about, and the show list kind of went out the window. Yeah, and one of the things I think that we're both really passionate about that came through in the beginning, especially of this conversation, is the current messaging around menopause and menopausal hormone therapy, or HRT as it's called in some places. Back in 2020, we were both on a mission to make sure that women understood that hormone therapy had been wrongly demonized by the Women's Health Initiative study, and that it was largely safe and underutilized, and something that really women, when they hit the menopause transition, should be offered, and it's ridiculous to suffer needlessly. That message was really important. And in 2020, that was sort of part of our mission. And since that time, the conversation has really, really evolved in many great, great, great ways, but also in some ways that are concerning. The conversation in some places has evolved to a place where menopause is being viewed as this deficiency disorder, and there's a conversation that every woman should be on hormone therapy. And while there's no question that it is an amazing tool and a very important therapy, it's not for everyone. And we still have a lot to learn about how it does and how it maybe does not prevent some chronic diseases. And the first part of this conversation is definitely us reacting to some of the whiplash we feel, as well as our frustration over the predatory marketing to menopausal women that is happening now, which is only going to accelerate. Otherwise, I think what I enjoyed most here was hearing about Amanda's newest initiatives, including her work regarding menopause in the workforce. I've been a little nervous about that conversation, if I'm honest, because I don't want the powers that be to have yet another reason to discriminate against women. But I really loved Amanda's approach as she explains it. So I hope you enjoy this whole one as much as I did. All right, before we get to it, as always, check us out on Instagram and Facebook at Feisty Menopause. Sign up for my free weekly blog at feistymenopause.com. While you're there, check out our Level Up Menopause membership, where we meet with experts 3 or 4 times a month in person, well, sort of on Zoom. And thanks so much for the continued great reviews and 5-star ratings. They really help me continue to get great guests and to grow this show. And we have really great aspirations for it, I'll say, going into its 3rd year coming up, which is ridiculous. All right. Super quick thanks to Previnex for their continued support of the show. I got another amazing review for the Joint Health Plus product, which has been a savior for me. Sandra gives her 3-week review of using it, and she says, I've been using the Joint Health Plus capsules, and as a menopausal active woman with joint pain, I have seen positive progress in pain, inflammation, and mobility issues of my knees, most notably. This has motivated me to be more active and push my strengthening and mobility exercises more. Love to hear it, Sandra. I'm with you. Thanks, Previnex, for your continued support and all you do to keep us healthy and mobile. All right, enough of me. let's have a few words about our awesome sponsors and get on with the show. All right, Amanda, welcome back. It's been a
Can't
minute.
believe it's been look, is it 3 years since
Your book
we
came out in
spoke?
October
Yeah,
2020, right? I started this show in September 2020. So it's not quite 3 years, but we're gonna blink and it's gonna be 3 years.
almost. Damn it. Yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. Yeah, we've been connected for that long, and you're my go-to. I love you.
Yeah, I love you too. I love you. And it's you're sort of an island of stability and sanity in what is an increasingly turbulent sea of, oh my God. I it's, um to give people some reference, when we started this, it seems like it's not possible, but people really weren't talking about menopause that much, like it was just sort of entering, starting to break down that wall. And now I feel like it's everywhere, and that's positive and negative, right?
It's exactly that, right? Yeah. So I mean, for when I wrote the book, I hadn't even heard of the word menopause. And now we're going back 10 years, like when I went into perimenopause, like I was 42. And then like the book came out 3 years ago, and I started having the conversation like you with this community and stuff. And then like now I feel like we've got events, we've got summits, we've got and it's so great. We've got podcasts that are specifically for menopause. And I do believe that there's more good than bad out there. There's always bad players though, because it's an easy target for a lot of people. And when if you think about our knowledge base, Celine, like we've sort of went into this from a health and wellness like career, and then we're like learning about this all the time, but we're learning about menopause and our physiology from an educated standpoint in that field. And so you've got women like on the ground that are going, but so and so said that like I have this gluten intolerance now because of estrogen. And I'm like, oh my God, like just stop making shit up for the sake of it, right? And then but the women on the ground are the ones that are like, but what do we believe, right? And I feel so bad for them because this like they're desperate, they're vulnerable, and they want help, right? And often the stuff that we say is a bit boring.
And
Like
I'm of two minds of this too, because the medical system has done a giant disservice to us for so long, right? Like us being menopausal women, black women, let's just like the whole
yeah,
umbrella. So an amount of distrust of that institution is not unwarranted, and I understand that when you have been ignored and when people have told you one thing. I mean, look at the whole women's health initiative study that we started talking about 3 years ago, that was like, that put a wet blanket on research on hormone therapy for literally decades. We find ourselves in this place where women want answers. They're frustrated. They've not been heard. That medical schools haven't taught it, and now we're just trying to like lasso everybody and catch them up to us, and we want correct answers now. And we might, when I look at it, Amanda, I think we might never have some answers. There's so many forms and formulations of menopause hormone therapy. There's so many different women's and so many different genetic variations. Like, these answers are not going to be easy or forthcoming anytime soon with randomized clinical trials. That's just not going to happen.
so first of all, I say lasso. I don't know if anyone cares, but when people say lasso, it's just like that's such an, and it's only because of the TV show Ted Lasso that I was like, oh yeah, I lived in Texas too, and I did a lasso, but I didn't know that's how you said it. So there you go. It's like boy and buoy, when you swim with a
You
swimming boy, we call it a boy. I'm pretty sure we invented the language, so you can't really argue with me. But going back to what you said, you know what, I agree completely, and I think it's absolutely completely fine to say we don't know, and I don't think that that was an answer I was satisfied with when I started talking about menopause, 7 or 8 years ago, and I wanted answers, and I hated it when doctors would say, "Well, I don't know. We don't know exactly." And I think that it's actually fine to have the I don't know conversations, or acknowledge the fact that where research is slowly developing and slowly happening, and some are going to have different outcomes, like the HRT dementia statement that just came out recently. It was really interesting to see people's reaction to that. This is just an example. People like saying, "Oh, this is terrible that people said that because it was using old forms of HRT, the oral HRT, and it was observational. And you can't scare women into thinking HRT gives them dementia." And all of those things can be true. Um, and actually, it's not old because some people still use that medication because that's all they can get. So let's just stop saying that. But the thing is, it can be true based on the study that they did. And at the other side, they use their argument that, well, there was another study that showed that HRT benefited Alzheimer's, and it reduced the risk of it by whatever percent. And I went, yeah, but that was an observational study too. And that was based on a certain criteria of women that had money, had insurance in the US, were already fit and healthy, no pre-existing comorbidities. And so their chances of them getting Alzheimer were already reduced because of their lifestyle and their income level, blah, blah, blah. And so I'm like, it's okay for these things to exist, because what happens is eventually all gets put together and we have this metadata that we can say, at the moment, it's null. There's a null effect as it stands. And it's okay to say that, but I don't think that that sells. That's a good conversation. I don't think a lot of women like that conversation. I think a lot of the doctors out there that literally use their platform to make money on selling hormone therapy use the studies disingenuously, and it drives me a bit nuts. Anyway, rant on.
Well, no, but it's true, and especially when you look at brain health, which there are reasons that the Alzheimer's Association and those bodies are still like, we are not recommending this prophylactically for because like there's research is too all over the place, and when you go into some of like even the more granular research that's being done on like brain scans and checking, volume of the brain and stuff. There was a really interesting study showing, in women who had the ApoE for, genetic
Yeah.
predisposition, they had some increases in brain volume, and like it did seem to benefit them in those ways, but only those women. The women who didn't have the ApoE for it wasn't detrimental necessarily, but if you read
No.
through the whole study, and I did, part of their brain, the women who didn't have that genetic position got smaller. Like, right? So like it's very complicated, and
Yeah.
there's a reason that the studies are all over the map, because it doesn't work the same way for everyone. And this is all a long way of saying um that we are, again, probably not going to know, but also don't just, there is no one like magic wand for everybody, that, and it's being sold that way. We're talking specifically about hormone therapy. In many ways, I see it in my community. People are like, I am going to take it because it benefits my brain and it benefits my heart and it benefits. I'm like, maybe,
Maybe
maybe
not, maybe not, maybe not
we don't.
as well. Right. Yeah. And
If
so
you're taking it because you have symptoms, because they're connecting symptoms, I didn't mean to step on you, but like if you have severe symptoms, we know severe symptoms are sort of linked to a lot of these things. We don't yet know if taking care of that is going to prevent those things, but it makes sense to take care of your symptoms, right? Like I think that's clear.
yeah,
But
and I think that you and I have both been very good proponents of hormone therapy for symptom management, because we don't want women to suffer. And for the most part, most women that take it really do well on it, right? And there's still a lot of women don't take it. Like, it's an underutilized treatment
yeah,
for symptoms as it stands. And I think that when we talk about it, we should be elevating the knowledge base, because to me, this is the whole thing. There's this knowledge gap with women, with medical, like within our communities. There's just knowledge gaps that we need to fill. And so, yes, try hormone therapy if you're a candidate. Don't take it if you can't. Stop taking it if it makes you feel shit. I mean, that's my stance because it did. It was wretched for me. And I think that it's a drug. And I think we need to stop saying it's a natural thing to treat symptoms. It's a drug. It's made in a lab. You're not rubbing half a yam on your leg and getting the benefits of that, right? So I think that you got to respect drugs, in my opinion, and they're not going to be for everyone, but for those women that can take it with full knowledge of what we know right now. That's it,
Y-
right?
Yeah, we touched on your experience, now almost 3 years ago, and I think that's worth revisiting. Talk about a little bit about that. Like you were in the throes of it. You had a very difficult transition, hence the book, The Menopocalypse, right? I mean, there's a reason that you wrote it. What led you to hormone therapy, and what was your experience with it?
Yeah, so I had a 2 years floundering with symptoms that I didn't recognize. And I think my story is very similar to a lot of women. So from the age of 42 to 44, I struggled. Then eventually saw gynecologist, and in the medical system in Canada, by the way, at the time, it's not so great at the moment, but was so helpful. They were desperate. I don't wear sickness well, Celine. I look terrible. I'm one of them people. And they kept saying, "You look so bad. You look so sick." But we don't know what's wrong with you. And it was really demoralizing. So ultimately, it was migraines with aura. I never had the headache, but the aura with vertigo and nausea, and then depression. And I'd never experienced these before. They were my main symptoms. And when I eventually found out what they were from a Cluedian gynecologist, I was 44 and 8 years ago, and he turned around and said, "Well, I can help you, hormone therapy. I can give you it." And I went, I don't think so. I don't think I want cancer. Thank you very much. No. And then he said, "Well, then I can give you an antidepressant, venlafaxine, that can help Effexor, I think it's called, and
Mhm.
but it can help with the depression and the migraines." And it did until other symptoms came along, right? And so it was when the other symptoms came along that I thought, now I feel like I've filled my knowledge gap. I feel very confident that hormone therapy is safe and that I feel good about taking it. Because by this time, I built an army of doctors. Like we have all of these great experts we can tap into. And then it just was then about a 4 year period of me trying hormone therapy, trying it for 2 or 3 weeks, and then feeling great until I didn't. And then the drop was always much lower than where I started. And I was like, oh, it's the combination. So I'd try it for maybe 3 or 4 months in total. So I had another, say, 2 or 3 months of feeling way worse than I did before I went to the doctors. And I'd come off it and I'd feel, oh, I don't feel as bad again now. But my symptoms were always there, and I was never the person I was meant to be. We've said this before, Celine. Like, I would look in the mirror and go, I can't live with this person. Like, I don't recognize you. You don't have the energy or the oomph or anything. Like, when I was doing everything I could to feel better, like, I was so good with my lifestyle, and I was really trying my best with all of the stuff. And the hormone therapy, I just kept thinking, oh, it's the wrong formulation. So they would increase it, or they would change the formulation. And every time I had 2 or 3 weeks of feeling great, and then these massive slumps, to the point where at one point I started to have suicidal ideation. And I think that was from the progesterone. I was on at 400 milligrams at one point, and I was literally going crazy. And my husband's like, "Please just stop taking it. It's the hormones, they're messing with your head. I can just see it." And then, so I crawled over the finish line of perimenopause into menopause. It was just it was like an apocalypse for me. But things had started to get better. Things had started to ease off. My depression had largely gone. My migraines were managed by migraine medication, and everything else was manageable. So I felt like by the time I got into menopause, it was manageable. And then speaking to actually the new head of the Canadian Menopause Society, she said, "I can't believe that doctors just didn't say to you, come off it because you have hormone sensitivity. You have classic symptoms of it." My pregnancies were just the worst. I was one of the ones that was sick from start to finish. And then when the baby popped out like torpedoes, I felt completely back to normal. I could never go on any hormone the pill or any contraception. I really struggled with it. She was like, they're clear signs, and you should have been asked about that because there's other treatments. And so I felt a bit frustrated by that, but then I can talk about that from an experiential standpoint. And then, now I'm 4 years. Oh my gosh, 4 years. I was 40, yeah, 4 years post-menopause. And, it's like, oh, thank God for that. It feels like so good to be back. You're the same, right? Like it's like this new lease of life, and things aren't always smooth, but 89% of the time it is.
Yeah, no, I feel really good. I feel great. Like the anxiety for me was like part of like probably the worst part, and
I
that was
remember that you were crippled with anxiety, right? Yeah.
yeah. I mean, I got through it, but I just got through it through sheer will of getting through it. I because I didn't at that time know that that's what was that was a sign. It was, and it can be one of the earliest signs that women experience. So at that time, I mean, I wasn't having hot flashes at that point. I started then having night sweats, but that wasn't unfamiliar to me as an endurance athlete because sometimes during hard training blocks, I would kind of turn into a furnace during the night. So
Ah,
yeah, so it was really hard for me to connect the dots until like some of the clearer signs, your periods, like all that kind of stuff. I'm like, oh, okay. But it still wasn't until like I started digging in and doing the research for the book and all the other things, I was like, oh, huh, how about that? How about that? So
yeah, and then the
yeah,
two of us, like these books we've done, and it really is to try and fill like the knowledge gaps. And I think we have two different audiences. I think you drive more towards the athletic
yeah.
community who have different needs and wants type thing, and mine's more general population. But there's definitely a crossover there. Like and I don't know if people like realize this, but you, Carla, and I are Carla. I'm not going to say her name because I say it wrong.
DiGirolamo.
I love, yeah, you've been practicing your big girly
Yes, I did.
SWAT, your big girly SWAT, like, oh, Dr. Carla. I just call her Dr. Carla. So we will often like exchange conversations and ideas because like it's really good to try and fill that knowledge gap and then share that with our community, right? Like I think that literally is the reason we're here, personally. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's going to, people are like, well, how long are you going to talk and write about this? I'm like, it's ever evolving, especially now. I mean, there's always something to talk about. There's always research coming out.
And there's always more women. It's not like we stop
Oh
going through
well,
menopause.
that's true too. It's a moving train that people are always getting on, and at some point, and hopefully getting off the train at another point. But it is interesting, what do you think, you're feeling better now. Are there any things that you can put a finger on or put a pin in that you do feel like made a difference when you were going through all that really did yield a net positive to how you feel now?
Yeah, so I needed medical help, right? There was no doubt about it. I couldn't do it without it. And so it was the migraine medication ultimately was what I needed. My depression was something that was really new to me. And I've had a bit of fit time growing up. Like I've had things that have been really impactful. And I'm very British about putting things in the box and moving away from them. So maybe they came back to bite me.
Mm.
But there was some things that I really realized that I needed to do. And at the time they didn't feel as impactful as they do retrospectively. Does that make sense? Like, so I
Yeah.
was doing them thinking, this is a waste of time, but really it was good work for me. And I think it was more to do with my mind, like how I process things. And because I was already doing the physical, like trying to, and my food was all over the shop, by the way. It wasn't good, but at least I knew how to rein it back in and the exercise. So they were there and they were like, again, like up and down, fluctuating, but I'd never really spent the time to like look at what does aging look like? What does it look like for you to handle your stresses? I have family that, I have a neurodiverse kid that takes up a lot of energy, love him to bits and everything, but it's a different type of parenting.
Mhm.
And my cup was so full. I was like, how do I like spill some of this coffee out and make myself feel good again? And so I started taking time for myself, and it was that simple. That was the key thing to me, instead of putting everyone first. So it was either getting up for a cup of coffee on my own on the morning, going for a walk, and I go on holiday on my own. I love it. Like I do things where I literally put myself first, and I've never done that And you know what? Nobody cares in my house. Nobody ever went, look at Ma. She's so indulgent and she's so like selfish, looking after herself. They reap the benefits of me like calming down. And so the whole I wasn't a big person who meditated. I wasn't someone who wanted to go to counseling, and they're brilliant for women. I realize that, but maybe it's a cultural thing. But I really loved like going for like really slow runs, just where I would listen to music and just be in nature. And honestly, I became the person that looked at birds and go, "Oh, there's a
I'm one of those
yellow-tailed
now.
warbler."
I
There's a
am
yellow-tailed warbler, and then
I
go
am
home and
also
Google
one
it.
of those now. I have a bird app where it's like Shazam for birds. Where do you have that? Where you can Oh, it's
There's a
called
bird app.
Merlin, and you record, and it picks up all the bird calls and tells you what the birds are around you.
I need that. I need that. And
Highly
so and so
recommend.
and so there was a sign when I was doing this I was living in Texas. This cardinal and his like wife used to come and visit me in a blue jay, and I was like, it's a sign from Canada saying hello to me because I'm talking from Canada. And then I sort of just realized that like nature's freaking brilliant and awesome, and it really helped my mind, like, and it helped me be able to like start to swim. And I taught myself to swim, right? It was another thing that I don't do it as a physical thing because I'm slow and I don't care how fast I am. But I've never been in my own head. I've never spent time in my own head. And I have to slow down and and I love it. Yeah, it's quite a nice place to be, it turns out.
You are really, I mean, you're really on to something there, though, and it's so many things. I've done numerous shows on how stuff from our past comes to roost during the menopause transition for whatever reason. That's like there's studies on that, right? That women who have unresolved things, issues, trauma, whatever you want to call it, often have a harder menopause experience. And it's hard to tease out exactly what's going on there, but the research is pretty clear on it. And taking time for yourself and communing with nature, which has also been found to be highly therapeutic, and the open water swimming that you're doing and the being in nature, I mean, I think you've just like tapped into a really important thing.
Someone at my door, I have to let him in. So we'll just
Okay, no
we'll
problem.
open water
I got a
swimming. We'll
producer
co
for that.
All right,
Yeah,
okay, 1 second.
yeah.
So there is that. Okay, cool. And then I just say, when you have a friend, I have to put in the power giving to the work. It's nice. So you can see there's a couple of pieces there. So, all right. Thank you so much. Can answer that then. I can
No
answer you.
problem.
Shall I jump back in? Okay.
Yeah, so I had just started saying that you, though
In the open water
reluctant
swimming, yeah.
perhaps culturally to get therapy, found your own therapy through a nature RX, if you will. Anyway.
And the open water swimming was something that, you know, hadn't planned to do. My husband's an incredible swimmer, like university captain type swimmer. And I always used to watch him swimming up and down and be super jealous of him, thinking, why can't I do that? And I would always swim like one length and then be exhausted and be puffing and panting and have to do breaststroke in between. And so I eventually taught myself over like a 10-week period so I could swim a mile. And he was super proud of me and bought me a wetsuit when we were in Texas and then took me in a lake. And he's so pale, like he's from Scotland. And he's so pale that he swam next to me, like at half. I think he tied his legs together or something, so he'd be super slow. Because I'm really slow and he's super fast. And I could see his white body like next to me, so it kept me in a straight line. And then when we moved back to Toronto, he's a member of the Lake Ontario swim team. And I went along and I just was like, oh my God, I didn't realize it could be so cool. And there's this whole community that I've like found. So as well as having this like meditative like experience when I'm out there, I'm like swimming with like 80-year-old women that always have red lipstick on, and they're doing like 2 mile laps around the buoys or the buoys. and um and so now like I just feel like I never thought swimming could do that to me, but now I understand why my husband's like so into it. And yeah, he's swimming Alcatraz this weekend, by the way, because he's like loony.
Wow. That the Escape from Alcatraz event? Like, do they still do
Yeah.
that? Where they jump off of
Yeah, they jump off the rock, and then and it's only like a mile and a half, which is still significant, but it's choppy and it's cold, and he might get eaten by a shark. And I've got life insurance. We're all good. I've
it'll
checked it
all be
all out.
fine.
It's all fine. Not worried about it.
Wow, that is really awesome. And I didn't know that open water swimming was so recent for you. I mean, I've seen it on your Instagram, but that's very cool that
Yeah,
you
two
found that.
two 2 years. Yeah, so I hope I keep it up as well, because I see it's a sport or an activity for all ages, right? And
Oh,
that's what I think I
totally.
like about it. Yeah. All ages, fitness levels, shapes, sizes, anything goes.
It's
Yeah.
very cool. Yeah, it's a very, very cool community. I